Welcome to Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and as I always say, I never ask anyone to do anything that I didn't do. And even though I've been out of prison for almost 10 years, I am still reaching out to leaders, people who have built successful businesses or successful lives, to learn from them. This is what I did to get through 26 years in prison. It's what I'm still doing today. And I'm so enthusiastic to be able to introduce you to John, a successful investment banker, investor, entrepreneur, real estate developer, and we're going to find out by listening to his story just how that methodical pathway began for him and how he used those same skills we cover in our course Preparing for Success After Prison influenced his life. So John, I just want to really thank you for taking time out of your weekend to participate with the Prison Professors program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thanks for the invite. I appreciate you having me.
Well, you were so generous when I reached out and said that we have more than 100,000 people in jails and prisons going through our course, and we're trying to teach those people how to be, mini Johns, successful people who can go out and create their own jobs and their own income streams. And I think we can learn a great deal by just listening to your story. Would you be so kind as just to give us the background about how you would define your main career?
Well, my main career started right out of college for me. I started at a firm, Lehman Brothers, really as what we used to call a gopher. I was what we would call a cold caller. I would call people and try to get them on the phone for leads, for advisors. But when you're in that position, you're also always asked to go pick up someone's cleaning or go fetch lunch. So I enjoyed it. It was, they paid you hourly, but you worked many more hours than you got paid.
So you started off in financial services right out of college, but then you've built a pretty successful career at the other side of your career. What businesses did you create, and what did it look like?
Well, I always felt like I had wanted to be an entrepreneur. I enjoyed working for a big firm and being an advisor. The more I started working with our clients at these firms, doing corporate and executives services with officers and directors, I really started learning more than what I learned in the classroom about what it takes to set up a corporation or LLC, and also how you have to hire a good team around you. You have to learn to delegate, learning about, you can have a great product and a huge market, but you have to have a plan and you have to learn how to go execute it. A lot of businesses fail because they're all over the place and they don't have a plan or guidance. I've seen a lot of businesses fail that had a great product and had a huge market,
What
but they
kind of
just
what kind of businesses did you build? You started off in financial services. What did you eventually build?
well, look, I did a little bit of everything. I started out in financial services, but then I had a lot of passion for young athletes wanting to. I got into youth sports, and I wanted to teach athletes how to run faster and get off the bench, and started studying about plyometrics. And then I opened seven franchises, speed and agility, and then ended up buying the franchisor, recapitalized it, brought in a new board. So that was one business that was very interesting. That led me to get into the sporting good business. I bought a sporting good company called Honeycutt Sports. Rick Honeycutt, who pitched in the major leagues for 22 years for the Dodgers and A's, Cardinals. He was looking to go back to be the Dodgers pitching coach. I bought his sporting good company and I got into team sports and retail. A very interesting business, the sporting good business. I purchased a franchise for a bottled water company, Grayson Mountain Water. That was an interesting business. Before, bottled water was just something you did to be hip. Cryptosporidium changed everything about bottled water, and I knew that was coming.
What year was that?
That was probably in 95, 96.
Yeah.
And then, then you're learning warehouse, you're learning trucks and forklifts. But the biggest thing you learn in that business is slotting fees at grocery stores. Like, how do you get your bottled water on the shelves next to Coca-Cola? That's called slotting fees. Every business I've started, bought, turned around, or closed, I've learned more than I've ever learned in a classroom.
So that's the important takeaway there that I wanted to share with our people in our class. They've all gone through a series of modules that show them that if an individual develops strong communication skills, some basic math skills, so a self-directed work ethic, they can open up any number of opportunities. And what I'd like to do now, we see that we're talking to a successful entrepreneur, a guy who's built a career using many different pathways, including licensed financial services, but also just being an entrepreneur. And I suspect that by the end of this interview, we're going to see the importance of building a vocabulary, developing strong communication skills, and a self-directed work ethic. Why don't you tell us where you grew up, John, and what your ambitions were as a child?
Well, I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It wasn't that we were dirt poor. I didn't miss any meals, but we did not have a lot of money. I would say, my parents divorced early on. My mother worked two jobs. I would say we lived paycheck to paycheck, hoping nothing would break. And that really gives you a drive to grow up that way. And I grew up, like typical kids back at my age. I'm 58 years old. I mowed yards and did any odd jobs, delivered firewood, anything that I could find. That was back before pressure washers were popular, but I would rake leaves. So I just had a drive to, move out of a small town, which you look back now at my age, a small town has a lot of great things about it. But I had a drive to go somewhere where markets were bigger, jobs were plentiful, and I just wanted to live a good life. Early on, I guess I was like anyone. I wanted the nice car and that I never had, and the big house to show off. As you get older, you learn those things aren't that important. You'd rather keep money in the bank. So I had a real drive. I see some kids that are a little entitled now, and they don't seem to have that drive. So I look back at it now. I guess I was fortunate to be able to grow up.
What kind
And
of student were you?
I was not a motivated student. I wish now I would have been, but from I was a kid that I was very driven in sports. I was social. I liked going, out and having a good time. That carried on through college. And I feel like, I a type of person. I learn visually more than audio. You know, some people might say, they have trouble learning today. They do so much with ADHD and dyslexic. I think sometimes I might have had all of it trying to sit still in the classroom. So I'm a person that I can learn more applied knowledge more than can just sit in a classroom and have a professor show me something.
But did you
And
know as a high school student that you wanted to go to college?
oh yeah, I think I had a drive to go to college because then you were told if you don't go to college you can't get a job, and some of that's changing today. But I knew I wanted to go to college to get an education. Basically, I knew I needed to do better about being able to read and write, absorb what you're reading more than just going through what you're reading. And I'll have to read it 3 or 4 times. Um, I'm a big believer. The better you learn how to read, the more successful you can be. I think it all starts with your reading skills.
And that's certainly something anybody in prison could be doing is developing stronger reading skills, stronger writing skills, stronger verbal communication skills. I think all of that leads to success in many other areas, and I'm glad that you're kind of emphasizing that so that members of our audience can learn that as well. with
Yep.
with 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 your pathway to success in your career in financial services, where did you start your college?
Okay, I started out going to Tennessee, Chattanooga. My college was driven because I wanted to play college football. I never thought I was ever going to play in the NFL, but I had a real drive. I was trying to get scholarship money. I started out at Tennessee, Chattanooga. Then I moved to Tennessee Tech in Cookeville, Tennessee. Back when that was a smaller town too, but they were good schools. I majored in marketing and risk management. And then that when my football career was over after 3 surgeries, that took me to Atlanta, where I currently live and have been for 35 years of my life. Um, I started going to school at night at Georgia State University, finishing my degree. And then I started working at Lehman Brothers during the day, really learning a lot about business and also about sales. Um, you can go work at JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and you learn a lot about business, but you have to learn how to sell too. You got to go get clients, and that's a big factor. A lot of people don't realize in business is your communication skills. You have to network, you have to be able to communicate with people, and you have to get them to be able to trust you to do business with you.
So there are some great takeaways here in this initial segment that I just learned about John, and we've just gone from his childhood to getting his first professional career. But what I heard, and what I hope that members of our audience hear, is you've got to start by defining success. You got to know what you want. John
Correct.
told us that he knew he wanted to have a better car, he wanted to have a better house. Later, may he have changed those values to have more money in the bank, but he knew what he wanted. And because he knew what he wanted, he could set those goals. And those goals for him were to get good enough grades to get into college. He knew he wanted to play college football. Didn't want to go to the NFL, wanted to play college football. He's pursuing that same path that we are suggesting that you pursue. Start off by thinking about what it is you want and then what you're going to do to get there. He ends up getting to the financial services sector and realizes I've got to be a great communicator to excel. And because he's a great communicator, that influenced his journey. Tell us about how by focusing on communication skills, that influenced your sales capacity or your growth or your learning sales or bringing in business at Lehman Brothers.
Absolutely. And I think too about your goals. I just want to also say if your goals are money, there's never enough money. You're change your goals to I want to be senior vice president or I want to bring in 100 new clients. The end result of that is you will be making more money. But I think to feel more fulfilled in life, if your whole goal is just about making money, I think that's one thing also young people make a mistake on.
We could even
Is
go farther in that, John. And in our course, we talk about that, not only doing what you just said, say I want to be senior vice president within 3 years, or I want to bring
right.
in 100 customers within a year, right?
That's
And
right.
that's going to push you because then you can really assess whether you are delivering. And
And that's all about baby steps. It's like they tell people when you go on a diet, people make a mistake. They want to look like a movie star within 3 months. You're never going to achieve that goal when you quit. So just sit down and make reasonable expectation goals, baby steps. And the next thing you know, 3 to 5 years, next thing you know, you're off success. As far as communicating, I just learned that you got to be able to listen. Too many people want to go try to sell and they just talk and talk and talk. And you really need to just sit and listen. Your customer, your client, your patient, whatever business you're in, will tell you what they need and what they want if you'll just sit and listen. Too many people make the mistake of after a meeting for an hour, they did all the talking. So start out telling everybody who you are and what your mission is and what your goals are in the relationship. But at that point, just sit back and let them tell you what they want. That's the biggest communication skills you can have sometimes is instead of talking, just listen and just be sincere, build that relationship. And don't always call somebody when you're just trying to sell something. Make it a habit to call them on their birthday or if you know they're going through a bad time. The biggest thing people do is when times are tough in business, you tend to, that phone weighs 1,000 pounds and you don't want to call them or have lunch with them. And that's when you really build a relationship and learn how to communicate properly with somebody and earn their trust when you want to call and talk to them when things aren't so great.
So you pursued that path as a young gopher at Lehman Brothers. Tell us how your career developed using those same skills that you're sharing with people in jail and prison.
How my communication
No,
skills.
how that influenced your career. You started off as a gopher. How long were you a gopher before you started achieving or
Uh,
excelling?
about 2 years. And then I got the opportunity working hard. They gave me an opportunity to become an advisor. They sponsored me to get all my licenses and certifications. And then I ended up earning a desk, and then I ended up being my own advisor. And then that led me to when you have 4 or 5 years of good production and success, other firms start recruiting you, and you go from trying to fill out applications to get a job to people calling you wanting to hire you in any industry. I don't care if you're in medical sales or um, there are these professional firms out there that are recruiters in certain industries, and they're looking for people that are driven, honest, hardworking, smart people that want to be successful, and they work hard at their craft. And that's how you just can do it. Anybody can do this. Just back to what you're saying about reading. When you set up your own LLC, you got to learn how to read an operating agreement. You got to, if you set up a C corp, that's a shareholders agreement. These are things you can learn by reading books um, and making yourself, you know, prepared when you get an opportunity. Because a lot of these people want to set up their own businesses, and that really gives you a drive. After you work for somebody for so long, then you say, "Hey, I want to own my own business." That's the biggest drive you can have.
So you said that other firms started to recruit you. Walk us through the development or the trajectory of your career, starting off for a
Okay.
couple of years, then advancing, then being recruited. Where did you go, and when did you
Okay.
decide to break off and become an entrepreneur on your own?
I was very lucky. And I was at Lehman Brothers. They had just got bought by Shearson. And I got recruited to a great firm. I wanted to go to an entrepreneurial, smaller boutique firm, like at the time, Bear Stearns. And I ended up going to Oppenheimer, which was a great firm at the time. It was a smaller firm. And they recruited me over. And I had learned a lot at Lehman Brothers. I was there 5.5, 6 years. And then I spent 25 years at Oppenheimer. And they really taught me a lot about not just being a salesperson, but more on the business side. And I went and took classes. Like, I grew up, I didn't know which was the salad fork. And, you can learn all this online now. That was back in the early 90s. Proper skills. I went to some classes I signed up about communicating, what it means when somebody's crossing their arms when you're talking, or they put their feet up the desk and show you the soles on their shoes. All of these are things you can learn online now, reading books, and you can better yourself by you don't have to be in a college classroom right now at Wharton Business School to learn all these kind of things. There's such an open platform. So when I got to Oppenheimer, I was really driven to better myself. I wanted to learn about fine wines. I found uh, when I would go out with clients, I wanted to have things in common with them. Did they want to talk golf, fishing, wines? I wanted to be able to be on the same ground. Politics, I try to stay away from, but a lot of people want to talk politics, sports. So I would go into a meeting very prepared as to who is this person I'm meeting with, what are their goals and objectives, what are they trying to get accomplished, how can I differentiate myself from my competitors. So that's a lot of what I learned at Oppenheimer, and then that really made me go to the next level to be able to, for me, I wanted to be managing, $1 billion. That was my goal. I wanted to really be successful and be respected in the community. And so, and I started doing a lot of charity work. And I really was never, I was doing charity work. My priority was to do good things for people, but it really is also where you can really network too and meet successful people. And a lot of times how I learned things was being around successful people, mentoring me, listening, asking them questions. Always ask smart people questions.
So there's a lot of takeaways there that we can apply to our own life. I know that if I were in prison listening to John right now, a person who built assets that he could eventually deploy and have discretion over, he was searching for $1 billion. How did he do it? He did it by investing in himself first. He knew that if I'm going to be connecting with successful business people, I've got to communicate like successful business people. So he learned about wine. He learned about golf. He learned about the things that successful people do. And that helped maybe them identify with him more and contributed to the growth of his career. But eventually, my understanding, John, is that after you did become successful at Oppenheimer, you decided to break away from the corporate sector and actually go out and do this on your own. Could you walk us through that pathway of when you left getting a steady paycheck and saying, I'm going to go out and create my own jobs
Yeah,
and my own
sure,
businesses?
sure. And I wanted to leave sooner. Unfortunately, I try to stay in shape. I think it's also very important to be successful is eat a healthy diet, work out, exercise. Um, I was going to leave in 2008, and then you know the
Financial
market
crisis.
corrected. We had the Great Recession, and 14 I got sick. I was 50, and they said go get you're 50, you got to go get a colonoscopy, and I went and I found I had colon cancer. A lot of what I had learned in sports and in business got me over colon cancer. I went to MD Anderson and had surgery and got treated, and but that delayed me leaving the corporate world. So I ended up leaving in 2016, and I did a couple things. I bought a minor league baseball team. I love buying things I don't know anything about because that's how I learn about them. You also can't let your ego get in the way. You either need to partner or bring in people. You got to know your strengths. I'm not a great operator of a business. I'm an investor, but I learned to operate every business I invested in. And how I learned is I would bring someone in. I brought in a gentleman. I bought a team, the Chattanooga Lookouts. I brought in a gentleman, Jason Fryer, who owns the Fort Wayne, Indiana team, and he owns the Columbia Fly Flies. And I knew Jason had the ability to operate the baseball team and help me build a new baseball stadium. And he'd done it before, I hadn't, but I learned so much from him for 7 years being his partner. Um, and then I started developing strip centers. I brought in another guy that knew how to do this, Clint Wolford. We would go find properties, build strip centers. He knew how to go out and get a Starbucks. I didn't. To be the center of that strip center, the anchor, and then you fill it in with the mattress and the nail salon, and then you learn what cap rates are. I didn't know anything about developing real estate. And then you build a portfolio. They either cash flow or you sell them. There's all these REITs, real estate investment trust. They're publicly traded companies that just buy real estate. They're flush with cash looking for deals. They're not developers. They want to buy cash flow. So you learn these different things. When I left Oppenheimer in 2016, that is when I set up, I got involved with Southport Capital. I had gotten involved with them earlier, but I couldn't leave Oppenheimer for a couple of reasons. So we built that firm from 120 million to 150 million, maybe, to $2 billion by 2000 into 2021, and we built that organically, growth, and we also built it with rolling up a bunch of registered investment advisories. You start learning about multiples, EBITDA, like how do I buy these companies? I learned all that on the street. There was nobody at Harvard teach me how to go out and find a registered investment advisory that was doing $1 million in revenue, putting 250,000 to the bottom line, and you figure out, is that a 5 multiple, 6 multiple? Has to do with age of the client, geographic area, and you figure that out and you roll them all up, and then you can sell them at a 19 multiple. And this is a game that anybody right now in prison can learn, and they can go out and be very successful. with a drive to do these kind of things. Because I will tell any of them, I never got into one business that I really knew a lot about. I would study the market, read about it, but that's fine. You can say I did all this preparation, but until you do it, you really learn building it. And look, you probably have some failures. I had failure. I'm telling you all successes. I had failures, and you're never going to learn how to be successful without a few failures. So that's where you really learn.
So there's a lot I'm learning here, and that I hope that if I were in prison, this is the kind of interview that would have really motivated the books that I read, the friends that I chose, the time I woke up in the morning, because I'd start being like John. I'd want to say, I want to control my future. And he started controlling his future in methodical ways as a young man by deciding to go and get a college degree. Football was a kind of a pathway for that. Then getting into the financial services sector, then learning skills that would help him build a client base and a book of business, and then going to Oppenheimer and refining personal development himself, and then going out into becoming an entrepreneur. What I'd like to ask you some questions now is just drill down a little bit, because you've introduced some concepts that are normal and fluid for you, but maybe for some people in our audience, they won't even know what that means. And that was an LLC, a limited liability corporation, and a subchapter S or a type C corporation. Could you give us a little tutorial on what corporate structure even means, like the different types of corporate structures that you just described?
Sure. Well, an LLC is one of the most popular businesses. And now, some people in government don't like them because they're what we call flow throughs, and that is you can actually that's where you get a K1 at the end of the year. Where in a corporation, it depends on what you're trying to get accomplished. Corporation does its own; it'll do a tax return. It gets taxed by what you want at the bottom line. An LLC is all the partners. They pay tax personally. The LLC really doesn't, because everybody gets K1, and all that tax is flowed to the general partner or the business partner. An LLC gives you a lot of ways to run a business with a manager who can have total control, but you have a board of directors that he answers to, and you don't have shares, you have units. Okay, that's a big difference. And that's why I say you need to learn how to really read a shareholder agreement, because that's basically where all the rules of the LLC are. And that is, do you need supermajority to change direction in the company? So if you invest now, when you start out, and we call them angel investors, when you want to start your own company, and then you do a round one, a round two, or an A, a B round, a C round, different tranches of money. As different tranches of money come in, you can change those rules, because what protects you you want passive investors. You really don't want active investors. They want to sit on your board and drive your life crazy. You really want somebody to say, here's some money. I'm busy over here doing what I do, but I really wanted an alternative investment that's not correlated with the S&P 500. And I believe in you, your product, your market. Go execute. You need that operating agreement to make that investor feel comfortable. These are the rules and how we're going to run the company. And that's why LLC is easier to run when you're wanting to start, if you're an entrepreneur and want to start your own money. Don't get me wrong, there's advantages of an S Corp and C Corp, but a lot of that comes back to your accountant telling you, whether or not, when you want to buy something too, just do an asset sale. Buy those assets, and don't buy the previous S Corp or C Corp or LLC, because you're bringing on all those liabilities. Even at the closing table, they'll tell you that you won't be liable for anything that happens prior to closing. But there's so many advantages to having an LLC. So that's the difference to me. It's a lot of it has to do with taxes.
So I have some great takeaways there. If I were in prison, it would influence the books that I want to read, and let me explain to you why. if I'm in prison, I was in prison for 26 years, but I always considered myself to be unemployable. I would never get a job.
Hmm.
I knew that I made bad decisions when I was 20, and because of that, I have to figure out a way to create my own jobs. Well, today I get to listen to a guy who's created hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs, who's run businesses that have generated or been involved with hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. They had $2 billion. And we have this opportunity to listen and learn from him. You may say to yourself, well, I'm never going to do something like that. Well, what if you want to get out and start a lemonade stand? Okay. That is an alternative investment. That's something that John just said. It's something that's not correlated with anything. But if you just say, I want to build a lemonade stand, and that's a $700 investment or whatever, and that's the scope of your imagination, well, that's all you can do. But if you can tell a story, you might get 10 investors who say, I believe you can build a lemonade stand all over the city of Atlanta, and you got to start telling the story. So you need to be a good writer. You need to know some math so that you can tell the story. And then you can divide it up and say, do I structure this as an LLC? And get passive investors that say, hey, I believe in you. Well, the time is now to start thinking about the business or the job that you want to create and how you're going to go out and persuade people that you're a good risk. That's what John had to do in order to become successful, but he did it at the right time. He said he wanted to do it in 2008. Health complication slowed it down a little bit. Clearly, he overcame that health complication. But then he went out and he did his first venture. And you said you bought a baseball team, John. Could you tell us what motivated you to want to go from financial services, say, I'm going to buy a baseball team? I don't even understand how that business works.
Well, that was interesting. I've always loved sports, and minor league baseball is um, one sport that's still around that's mostly affordable for families. You go to a major league game, it's a $350 night. Minor league baseball is it's very intimate. You're down close to the field. They'll have a lot of funny things going on with clowns in between the innings. It's affordable family entertainment. With that said, it's a great product where you can go see tomorrow's major league all stars playing at a young age, anywhere from age 18 out of high school to 22, 23. On the business side of it, um, you learn that you make your money on concessions. Um, you learn that apparel. Um, what you have to do is, and that's why you see these new stadiums today with suites. You make a lot of revenue when you have these suite sales, and you go after corporations. Corporate sales, all those signs out on the outfield, it's probably 20% of your revenue. Concessions, it's probably 35, 40. Then you have apparel, you have ticket sales. Now, in the bigger sports, it's all about TV revenue now, right? I mean, it's getting to where they want people in the stands, but the TV revenue in professional sports, as you see these crazy numbers announced of what TV paying, even college football, the Big Ten just got a a package where every team's going to get 75 million a year now revenue sharing just from TV. So as far as minor league baseball, you have to X that out. There's not a big TV market for that. So you got, like every business, you got to learn where your revenue generators are, and then you got to figure out how to operate it to money to the bottom line, and not do that too cheap. Some people, you got to be top line oriented, where you're trying to grow the top line through marketing strategies, getting out in the community, selling tickets. A lot of people, where they make a mistake, they run a cheap business. Instead of growing the top line, they just want to cut costs and run it too lean. And that's a success, that is to me, uh, instead of trying to be successful growing your business, if you want to um, kill a business and a prescription for not to be successful, you take sales out of it. You need to be growth oriented in any business you're in, trying to grow the top line, and then running the business to where you figure out what are the margins after growth of sales, and then what's my fixed cost, and how much can I put down this industry? Am I trying to put 10% to the bottom line, 20%? Now, there's two types of earnings: EBITDA and real cash flow. Warren Buffett would tell you EBITDA. He and Charlie Munger think that's just a bunch of scam. You want to know how you can cash flow a business, but most of the cash flow is going to come from growing the top line. So as far as minor league baseball, when you go into it, you have to analyze, how am I going to grow the top line? How do I get more 6th and 7th graders want to come to a baseball game? How do I get dads wanting to bring their kids to a fun event that's affordable, where I say if dad wants to have a beer, it's $2.50, not $9.50. And sell a hot dog. How do you sell hot dogs and make money? Lost leisures. What am I going to give away to get people in and then make money on ancillary stuff? Just things like that. So I really learned the baseball business, and like I said, I delegated a lot of things operationally to a partner that really taught me how to do it. So don't be scared to get into something you don't know. Just have conviction to what you're getting in. You have to enjoy it. I enjoyed learning the minor league baseball. It's not for everybody. That may not, but for me, I enjoyed it. Pick a business or an industry that you have conviction in and you like it. And you want to get up every morning and get out of bed and say, I'm doing this. It's hard work. It's not simple. It's hard. And you know, a lot of people will tell you that drive is a lot easier and better when you have conviction in a business you really enjoy.
They say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
That's right. And I enjoyed that. I will tell you, we had long hours. We were trying to get a new stadium built, which is going to come to fruition. But we enjoyed it. My partner, Jason Fryer, has 3 teams. He just thoroughly enjoyed it. He did go to Harvard Law. He went to Yale undergrad. He was much more formally educated than me. We were 2 totally different personalities. I really learned a lot on the street. So he was formally educated.
So there's a takeaway here for anybody who's watching this video. And now I'm going to tell you, I never ask you to learn anything I'm not learning. I'm hearing so much from John that I can really grasp, because while I was in prison, I was doing exactly what he said. Figure out how to interact and learn from people who know a lot more than you. And you can see I'm doing that right now. I don't know anything about baseball or team ownership, but I've heard 2 things that he said that he did that are super interesting to me, even though I don't anticipate I'll ever buy a baseball team. Or I want to do the other second thing that I heard that's interesting to him is open a strip mall and negotiate transactions with an anchor tenant like Starbucks, and then using that to sell to real estate investment trusts. The key component is whatever you're going to do, we can learn from leaders. We can learn their pathway to success. And I know that if I continue to ask John questions, which I will get more evidence of the importance of understanding vocabulary. We heard a lot of words and terms in here that you should be adding to your vocabulary. EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization versus cash flow. Do you know what those terms mean? If you don't, will you empower yourself by learning those terms when you go and try and start your hot dog stand or your painting company or your landscaping company or your mechanics company? All of those could be alternative investments. Another term we learned from John, right? There's so many, but we know develop your vocabulary so that you can communicate in the language of investors. Develop your writing skills so that you can tell a story with words, sentences, and paragraphs. Develop your math skills so that you can understand the mechanics of a deal. John, I'd like to understand a little bit more detail before we get into the real estate segment. Could you give us some of the mechanics of the deal of buying a minor league baseball team? What are the total revenues, or what are the revenues, and what are the you said that those revenues come from a variety of sources, including advertising by corporate sponsors, concession sales, hot dogs and popcorn and Cokes, apparel. But what about, and ticket sales? What are those revenues of a minor league team, number one? Number two, if I know that those sales are a certain number, What are the expenses? Do we have to pay players? How much is that? What are the major expenses of a minor league team? 3, what's the multiple? You've spoken about multiples. What would be the multiple of earnings to the acquisition price of the asset, the team itself? So start off by telling us about what are the typical revenues of a minor league team?
The typical revenues and anywhere from 4 to 6 million for a minor league team. And look, the average minor league team, and you'll learn it doesn't matter if they're A, double A, or triple A. It's all the same. I know Fort Wayne, Indiana is the most attended minor league team in the country, the Sand Gnats, and they're A, and they attend more than some double A and triple A teams. What you learn in this, it's all about the customer experience. Is you want to know what is the client experience, customer experience. When you go to a baseball game now, even the new minor league stadiums, okay, the major league baseball stadiums went from to being 1.5 billion now. The minor league went from to being 50 to 60 million dollars now. They're building new minor league teams, stadiums everywhere. They're revitalizing downtowns. It all started with Durham, North Carolina, and they're building these new minor league teams in the middle of a downtown. They're putting retail and residential around them. But the biggest thing when you go even in a minor league stadium now, it's almost like you're going to an entertainment place and there's a baseball game that broke out. There's restaurants there. It's a fan experience. They've got pitching machines for kids to get into, see how fast you can throw a ball. The other things you do is out on the field experience that you see in minor league, you don't see in major league. You let the kids go out and run the bases after the game. But when they announce the lineup, they let kids, baseball team come, youth baseball, run out to the field with the if you play right field on your baseball team, you get to run out with the right fielder minor team. So there's other things that minor league does.
But tell me about the numbers. So the team's going to
the numbers are 4 to 6 million
in annual revenues. And
that's annual. Annual revenues.
That's everything. That's concessions, sponsors, apparel.
That's right.
And then what are the costs to generate that 4 to 6
Well,
million?
I think you're going to find any business you get involved in, the two biggest costs you have are rent and employees. That's always usually your two biggest. But you have in a minor league baseball team, if you're doing 4 million, you're typically trying to put $600,000 to the bottom line.
So about 15%.
Right. About 15%. In minor league, you don't pay, the MLB team pays the salaries. You do not have to worry about paying the salaries. Everything else is your responsibility.
So great takeaway there for anybody who's trying to learn a new business. This business, you don't pay the players. The major leagues are paying the players. They want to develop those players. And you're providing that service and generating a revenue stream by providing entertainment. And so you got to be creative. And that requires what? Communication skills. But it also requires really just basic, quick arithmetic skills. Say, okay, instead of 4 million, I got to try to earn $600K. That's 15% of those sales, right? 4 million, 15%. That's a basic model. If I'm succeeding on that, John, we'd spoken about multiples. What would be the multiple that I'd be willing to pay for a company for a minor league team that's doing that? It's doing 4 million in revenues. It's profiting $600K after all expenditures.
Let me tell you about minor league baseball. What I found out, it's a compassionate purchase. There's better things to do with $12 million. So if you're earning $600,000, the bottom line, $15 million, you probably could take that and do better doing other things. Okay. But people buy some businesses just because they love it. And that's why you see so many business owners that did well in other things
Did you say that? Did I understand you to just say that if the company's doing about $600,000 in bottom line profits, it's worth about $12 million on the market?
That's right for baseball. I think there's better multiples you can get now. Like in the business I bought where I'm growing a registered investment advisory firm.
Let's get to
And
that in a second because there's a
okay,
takeaway there, and I don't want our listeners to miss it. We've heard John speak about a multiple. We heard him say a company that's doing $4 million in sales, $600,000 in profits on the open market is worth about $12 million. That's
that's right.
20 times. That's 20x the
That's
multiple.
right.
So when he's
That's
talking
right.
about a multiple, know what that means to become fluid in business. And now we're going to hear him contrast that with a different kind of a business
That's exactly right.
that has
So,
a
and the same
different
thing in
multiple.
if they ever follow the stock market, which another thing I suggest they learn, they can easily learn reading books and going online. Every sector's got a different multiple. Okay, if you're going to buy in technology, those things can go 50 times uh, EBITDA.
Sometimes
Where
they can go 50 times earnings. Sometimes they can go 1,000 times sales. Sometimes they're selling for $1 billion with no sales.
well, Twitter was not making any money, and they went for 44 billion.
Yeah.
So but that's all about. You're going to learn when you evaluate a business and start talking multiples. You start talking about how do you evaluate a balance sheet. We could do another call on that because intellectual property. There's a bunch of things you value that's not a tangible on a balance sheet. Okay, goodwill is a huge thing to evaluate on a how good's the brand, how long they've been in business, how big's the customer. That's goodwill that's on a balance sheet. But when you start talking about uh, a boring company that is maybe some of these companies trade like a utility. They trade at a PE multiple of 8, like a lot of banks. Technology trades 50 times earnings right now. Disney is trading about 50 right now. So, and so when you start talking multiples, every kind of business and sector is different. When you're the contrast of a Major League Baseball team is if I took $12 million and bought um, basically 5 RIAs that were doing 6 million in revenue. I'm putting um, say I'm putting it says 600 bottom line. I'm putting 2 million to the bottom line because the margins are much greater. Now I'm talking about an 18 multiple, 20 multiple on more EBITDA, and you're getting a much better harvest in that type of sector. Just not as fun. Not and so there you have to decide, do your research as to what what typical revenue top line can I do? What's reasonable to grow it? What's reasonable to operate it to the bottom line? And what is the typical multiple? Because every sector and industry has different multiples, and every company within that sector has different multiples. There's a lot of things that go into evaluating, like I said, your goodwill and stuff. Maybe you have the brand, like our baseball team had a national brand. It was the Chattanooga Lookouts. I could go all around the country, and that's a brand that's been in minor league baseball since 1860. And I'd go out anywhere in the country, and you see people wearing a lookout hat. Or I'd have my hat on. They said, "Where'd you get that hat?" I'd say, "You can go on their website and buy it." That's something that's gonna help you evaluate your company more.
So we're coming to the end of our time together, and I just want to do some takeaways here, John, and have you kind of walk me through what I am missing. If I were in prison and I was listening to this lesson, and I had gone through our course that we offer at Prison Professors, I would understand. I would be listening to an example. You've got to define success, and I heard John talk about that at multiple stages. He spoke about that as a young man, knowing he wanted to advance his life. So he knew what he wanted. And then we also heard him talk about that with when it came to the baseball team. He said owning a baseball team is not only about making money, it's also about really loving it and having that passion and knowing what he wanted. So he was willing to pay 20x 20 times earnings or because it was something he loved, even though there were other areas that he might make more money in. How can you apply that knowledge to your life? That leads to the second one, which are goals. You've got to set the goals that align with how you define success. And I heard John doing that. John understood what he wanted to do throughout his life, and he set goals that got him there. When it was time to build more clients, he'd set goals. I want to be a vice president. I want to bring in 100 customers. The money would follow. And that's how a billionaire thinks. They're moving their way through it. 3, you got to have the right attitude. John didn't do all of this for any other reason besides he wanted to be the best in the world at what he did. And he'd follow that path. And you've got to say, are you doing this? Are you learning? When I'm listening to him communicate, he's using the language of business that he has cultivated over decades. How can you do that? 4, fourth module in our course, you've got to aspire to being something more than where you are right now. You may be sitting in prison, but you could be listening to John and saying, well, I want to kind of be like John and go into all of his different sectors, develop partnerships with people, learn from operators, and do something that's exciting, that you love doing. You've got to aspire to something bigger too, whether you want to own a series of used automobile dealerships or repair lawnmowers or start a technology company. I mean, if you can visualize it, you could start telling the story, but you can't do anything if you don't take the next step, and that's action. You got to be self-motivated and self-directed. And that's another thing I heard about John. He said he was always developing in himself when he was talking about whether learning wine or golf, learning about baseball, learning about real estate. He said he didn't know about how to find Starbucks as an anchor tenant, but then he started developing it and he learned. So he takes incremental action steps. Then you got to make sure you're holding yourself accountable. We heard John talking about these numbers of multiples and price to earnings measurements and knowing how to be fluid. He recommended that you study the stock market because there's so much written about the stock market. If you could understand how public companies are traded and valued, you can become more successful in the private sector.
Correct.
So accountability is super important. You've got to hold yourself accountable. Number 7 in our course is you've got to keep your head in the game. You got to be aware. You could hear one thing I'm talking to John. He is super sharp. He is aware of different teams. He's aware of the value of different companies. He told us Disney's valued at 50x earnings while some other bank is 8x earnings. Did you hear that? Well, that's an example of somebody who's truly the best in the world at what they do. That's why he raised $1 billion, $2 billion, because he keeps his head in the game. But simultaneously, he said also, if you do this, the world becomes aware of you, and they know you, right? Remember when he said that people started to recruit him to do business with him? He said that he used to try to apply for a job, but then eventually the top player said, no, let's start looking for the best players in the field, and they start recruiting you, and that's why John got recruited to Oppenheimer and other industries, right? So the more aware you are, the more the world becomes aware of you. But you've also got to be authentic. That's the next module in our course, right? You can't talk about it. You got to develop your plan, your priorities, develop your tools, tactics, and resources. This course is a tactic. It is a resource for you to use. It's not the end game. It's not the key to your success unless you use it. And then you got to execute on that plan. The 9th module in our course, celebrate every little achievement. Listen to how John did that. First becoming a football player and getting into college, then getting a job, then advancing on the job. It's a series of incremental achievements. He'd said, he used that analogy of everybody wants to be a movie star overnight. No, it's a series of incremental steps. I didn't tell John to say that. Just by talking to leaders, I learned this message, and you could learn this message as well. And finally, the last module in our course is you've got to live in gratitude, appreciating the blessings that come your way. And look at what he's doing. He is living his gratitude. Not only did he volunteer to speak with me on a Sunday morning to share this with more than 100,000 people in prison, but he also agreed to write a lesson plan, and that lesson plan will articulate these programs, and that's what we're going to use to help you. We can't change your life. You've got to be willing to change your life. But I would recommend that you follow the pathways to success with John so that you can reach your own highest potential. John, when I just gave that little recap of what I learned from you, did I leave anything out or anything you'd like to share with our team?
No, I think I would like to just make sure everybody understands procrastination's a terrible thing. Just don't sit around and talk about it. You have to act and execute. don't be intimidated by anybody. Don't think. With that said, don't be having too much of an ego either. That'll get you in trouble on the other side. But intimidation is more about, I don't understand this sector. I don't understand. I can't do this. I didn't go to this school and get educated. How can I? You don't need any of that. Okay. Just find it something you want to do. You have conviction in it. The biggest thing you can do is differentiate yourself. Anything you get in, there's going to be competition. And how do I differentiate? If you want to start a shoe, do you like shoes? Start a shoe store. I like these two pair of shoes. I have conviction. These are the best shoes made in the world. Go find people to help you, teach you how to market, and find somebody to help you operate. There's plenty of people out there that will help you. These people are going to have great success stories. This is what happened to me. This is my journey. I really want to do better. I want to do something. This is my goal. There will be plenty of people that will want to help you. And that's how you learn from them. Never ask enough questions. Always ask questions.
And you can see I'm not asking you to do anything I didn't do. I didn't
That's
know
exactly right.
John. I reached out to John. He's a guy that's built billion-dollar companies, and I'm just a guy who served time in prison. When I told him I'm trying to reach guys inside, he said, "Let me volunteer. I'd love to help." You see, that's what I'm asking you to do. Be strong enough in your confidence that you could reach out and ask for help. That's what we advise people to do at Prison Professor, so that you don't become one of those statistics. We'll go out there and create your own jobs. That's what I learned how to do today from John. And John, I just want to thank you. You are now a prison professor.
All right. Thanks for having me.